Hello there, and welcome to Gooner U, where there are no degrees because the learning never stops. I'm Dove, a TA here at Gooner U, and my friend Keith is our stalwart distinguished professor of Arsenal and football studies. This week featured the second leg of our Champions League round of 16 match at home versus FC Porto, and that took about as long to say as the match was to watch. How you doing, Keith?
I'm good. I toyed, because I know you watch later, I toyed with telling you, hey, give yourself a little extra time for this one. But then I thought, no, I'm going to let him experience. Because there was no, I know I've done that for a Premier League game or two, but that just means there's a lot of extra time.
Basically,
it doesn't necessarily, it means there's a lot of
the one time I remember you saying that was when there was the equipment anomaly and the whole start was delayed by like an hour or something. I remember that too. They had equipment malfunction like a minute in or something like that.
Right, yeah, with it. Yes, yeah.
Which ended up getting edited out when I watched the replay.
Yeah. But for this, I was like, nah, you're going to...
No, that's a spoiler. No, don't.
I want this to unfold as naturally as possible for you.
No, that's a spoiler. That's basically saying that it ends with an aggregate draw if you told me that for this particular match, knowing the rules. So
I mean, not necessarily. It could have been a case of extended extra time.
Yeah.
We'll get into an extra time conversation, I'm sure. But right, I didn't want to go... At a certain point, right, you can only add so much time before it becomes...
It's not worth a warning. It's like, let's say that they added 15 minutes to both halves. Yeah, well, I guess that's ultimately how much did get added on is 15 times 2.
Yes.
But
well,
yeah.
And then...
So anyways, this week is not like, it's kind of like when we're telling the story of Passover at a Seder, like we're explaining why this week is not like other weeks in Gooner U. The schedule is very unusual this time around, where we recorded on a Monday. The Porto match was on a Tuesday, the same day that we released. And so all the news that we usually talk about at the beginning of the episode, because it happened generally before the most recent match that we're covering, instead it happened after Porto, and some of it is at least tangentially related to things that may have happened at Porto from what you're telling me. So we're going to break the typical format.
As a result of, plus leading into the coming weekend.
Sure.
Right, yeah.
So we're going to break from our typical format, and we're going to save the news and other soccer and football miscellany until after we talk about the match itself. We just can't wait to talk about this Porto match. There's definitely a few things we want to talk about. So this match happened March 12th. The final score is kind of the most complicated I think a score ever could be to describe. So the leg result was 1-0 Arsenal, which led to an aggregate 2-2 draw, which was broken 4-2. Oh, thank you. Yes. Inflation in my head. Thank you. An aggregate 1-1 draw, which was then decided by a 4-2 result on penalties, which is kind of funny because it makes it sound like we missed one of our penalties, but it's short-circuited because there was no way for them to win, and we'll get to that. But calling it 4-2 sounds different than what I would imagine just from hearing that. But anyways.
Yeah, so the way you would say that is, because if you look at the way it would flash up, say if it was on the ticker at the bottom of like an ESPN or a sports network, it would say Arsenal 1-0 winners, which they won. 1-1 on aggregate, and then usually it would have a note Arsenal advance on penalties.
Right.
And then
the penalty score is more or less immaterial.
The penalty score, it depends on the circumstance when you would list that. I mean, that's the truncated version that would appear, on the ticker, where of course space is at a premium. But of course, then it would be, Ars v poor. It would be about everything, squishing everything down. But yes.
I don't speak Chyronese.
Yeah, well, it's better than it was the home leg, but that we can play you can play the pronunciation game at home, everyone. But wow, that was something, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. So it's like early on, we did what we had to do. It's like we got the one that we needed out of the way in fairly short order.
It was so in a game like this where you're desperate for a goal, and we weren't desperate yet, but it was definitely a case where we were the team that had to take the offensive because we were trailing. Porto, of course, could be much more defensive, and this is a team that already was pretty defensive. You know, the goals, we sort of talked about this a little bit last week and in the aftermath of the first leg. Part of the goal of how do you beat a team that's so tightly packed like that is speed up the game, put the pressure on them make plays, make them do things with the ball. Part of the problem with that is, though, the pressure is also on you to score that goal, and the longer you go without scoring the goal, the more and more nervy things are going to get. And yes, it was before the half, but I have to admit, it was starting to get to that point where I was like, okay, like, I'm going to be cool. We're going to be okay. We're going to play well. But it was admittedly starting to get to that point. And it came from just that pass. So good.
One of Odegaard's specialties.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And it had to be. Look, we can complain about the physicality. We can complain about the inconsistent refereeing. We can complain about the time wasting. We can complain about the injuries. And, we commented on some of the Porto players cramping late in that notorious mid-March heat and humidity of London. All of those things are fair to point out. But they defended really well. They knew exactly what they wanted to do. They were very strong in the middle of the field. Their defensive line was very disciplined. As much of a pain it was to watch them sometimes, I enjoyed watching Pepe the Elder, if only because it reminded me that, yes, there are still professional athletes older than me. And so I'm saying there's still a chance. But they defended really well. It took a moment of, frankly, brilliance from Odegaard to make just a perfect pass and a great finish from Trossard, who, I got to be honest, I think like about 30 seconds before that, I turned to the guy next to me and was just like, I don't think Trossard's having a really good game.
Right. Before that, I would have agreed. Yeah.
And you know what? I don't think he had a very good game. Yeah. But the moment we needed him, just a class finish off an amazing pass.
Yeah.
The relief was palpable.
Oh, yeah, of course. But it's funny when I was saying that we did what we had to do like early on, I think it feels earlier on in hindsight just because the rest of the match dragged on so much with the extra time and stuff. It felt earlier, but I'm saying, it was in the 41st minute. I forgot that it was that close to halftime, which is kind of like the third quarter of the match in this context of a two-way match. Right, yeah. But I didn't realize it was that late. I didn't remember that anymore. So, yeah.
Yeah, only because, again, it was just starting to get to that moment where you're like, okay, we do need to score a goal. Because there was a sense, I think, and this maybe was my sense only, had we gotten an early goal, an early one, we could have potentially opened the floodgates on them. They had the confidence, they had the space to do all of that. The way we had done, not necessarily the way we did to Sheffield. They're obviously, Porto's a lot better than Sheffield or Burnley or, frankly, even Newcastle. They're actually very similar to Newcastle in a lot of ways. But I think if we'd gotten the early goal, that would have really been able to help us speed up the game a little bit. Of course, at that point, and Porto at that point has the advantage because for them the draw was fine, or losing 1-0 was fine because it took them to extra time and then potentially the penalties. It drags the game out, which ultimately, I don't want to say favors them, but increases their odds until you get to penalties, which are. They're not exactly a coin flip, but it's a completely different dynamic than, especially as a favorites versus underdogs and all that kind of things. But overall,
from what I've seen though so far in penalties, it does usually seem like certain teams are better at scoring penalties and better at defending penalties. Sometimes simultaneously, but compared to other teams, that you'll be better at one or the other compared to another team.
And there's just so much that goes into it. And we've talked about penalties before, but there's just the nerves involved. And again, that's where the overdog or the favorite versus the underdog mentality sort of comes in, right? If you're the favorite, like you have to make this, but if you're the underdog, and again, it takes some of that pressure off of you. But we were at home. We got the penalties. They took them on the North Bank, which was the side that had all of the Arsenal fans, as opposed to the clock end where the visiting fans are. And
they mentioned that,
players talked about that. Odegaard, slots his penalty and immediately turns and does this to the crowd as he does.
Is that decided by a coin flip?
As I understand it. Because they do a coin flip before, and now
to decide who gets to kick first. Like you get the choice of whether you kick first or second if you win the flip, right?
Supposedly, I wish I had remembered that, because I remember listening. I think the Arscast talked about this. That there was something about there was a comment made in the post game that wasn't. They apparently the only thing they actually decided was the end they would shoot on.
Oh, really?
So there was something to the effect of like they didn't choose what you thought they would choose, and now I'm annoyed that
okay.
I'm annoyed we didn't think
maybe
about that
while I
before,
describe what I heard during the commentary, maybe see if you can find something on that. Now I really want to know. But the commentators were talking about how, they say that you get the choice, but in practice, you're always going to pick to kick first. Like it's never going to be strategically advantageous to kick second. You always want to be controlling the flow. You want to be kind of setting the pace, setting the tone with your kicks. That was what they had said.
I guess. Yeah, I'm not saying that. I don't know.
It sense to me, but
I feel like this is one of those that probably is very much a personal tendency, because I could easily see it the other way as sort of saying, you want to go second. That way, you know what you have to do. Okay, they scored. Okay, or they missed. Okay, now we have a chance. If they miss, we have a chance to take control.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's an interesting. I think it's less so the order you go in and more the degree to which the players sort of take advantage of it.
Okay. Well, we can leave that for follow up if we can find out more about that. We'll talk about it in the next episode. But before the end of the half and stoppage time of the first half, we had Pepe taken out of touch. Like he had to walk out off the sideline because they blew the whistle for him. He received what the commentators described. They used a term that I would not have used as an American English speaker. They called it a rump injury. Have you come across a rump injury in professional soccer before?
I thought you were about to ask if I had ever come across a rump injury myself. Not that I'm aware of. I've never. Again, this one I watched in the pub. It was on spring break, so.
Okay.
I'll spend an afternoon in the pub.
Yeah.
I don't have anywhere to be. That of course meant I didn't hear any of the commentary. So,
right.
I'm trying to think. I've heard a lot of euphemisms over the years of various and sundry injuries. I'm
not even necessarily talking about the phrase, more just like walking off the pitch holding his rear in his hand. That was something I hadn't seen heretofore.
You watch long enough. Again, you think they don't play with pads. Pretty much any part of their body is liable to get whacked. Yeah. I think at one point, was it Rice took an attempted cross off his face. You play without pads, your entire body is liable to get whacked with something.
I guess that's just the adolescent still alive inside me that takes additional glee. Giggling about something like that.
Yes, rump. I know it is funny. There are a lot of other off-color ways you could really take that. But anyway.
So yeah, my summary of the first half was that they did put up a really good fight. Like you were saying, they defended really well, but we were relentless. And I did feel like overall we were just playing better. We were moving the ball consistently, frequently, accurate passes, numerous passes, like a lot of tiki-taka is am I using that right? Like I think a lot of that's kind of like ping-ponging it around, like just kind of moving the ball well.
Give and goes, yeah.
Yeah, and lots of shots taken that eventually did bear fruit. And so it felt like, we were maybe on the upswing and maybe the second half would yield a second goal that never came. But
Yeah, the game definitely got cagier in the second half. I thought Porto was a little bit better offensively. I wouldn't say they were better than us, but they definitely had a couple of stretches where you kind of like suck the air and like, okay, they didn't score. There were a few of those moments throughout the second half, and so. But I think I start to wonder, especially by the time we got to extra time, I think everyone was just getting tired. Like we looked a lot slower. Porto obviously being defensive like that kind of defending that it takes a lot out of you. And so,
oh sure,
and even more so, in some ways, they talk about it's harder to defend all the time than that, because you're always reacting in a lot of ways. So they were obviously going to be more tired. We looked, our guys looked a little gassed. We mentioned Trossard didn't have a great game. I thought Bukayo Saka actually was handled very well. I don't think he had a particularly great game. He wasn't bad, but it felt like Porto was able to contain him particularly well. And he has games like that still now and again. I mean, all great players have games like that now and again.
Yeah.
And then also I thought Saliba... sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was like, I also thought Saliba looked a little nervy at times. Like I've definitely seen him play a lot better. It's interesting. We talk about how important some of these players are. I mean, Saka and Saliba, I've always said, are two of our most important players, critical players. And I thought both of them were not in their best on the night. And, so it's a credit to us overall. But yeah, they, we still, I think, we're the stronger team overall. And I don't know what you think about this. I mean, if we want to skip ahead to the 67th minute there.
I was about to ask you about that same thing.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's...
So that was when the keeper and Pepe, I think this is Pepe Jr. because I don't have an accent on the E. They both collided. I don't remember which is which. I did differentiate because one does have the accent and the other doesn't, but I don't remember which this was. But anyways, they both, yeah. So they both collided with Kai Havertz. Odegaard's like, hey, loose ball, keeper down, everybody else down. Boop, gets what I was cheering profusely for because like, oh, this is it. This is how we win the match. And then it got called back because of Havertz pulling, I forget which of theirs, but pulling one of their shirts. That was the reason given. Okay. So pulling Pepe's shirt, that's the reason given by the ref for pulling the goal back. Like it was invalid because it was preceding a foul. But then Arteta was given a yellow card, I guess, for dissent, basically. But
he does very clearly give the VAR review symbol, which I don't know, because I mean there have definitely been cases where we've seen guys give the yellow card hand sign and not get card for it. But I suspect that was kind of the kicker, was that he
in the same vein, yeah,
yeah. I guess the most charitable way to say that is, had it been the other way, I'm not saying I would have screamed my head. I would obviously have been distraught to be able to goal, but I wouldn't have screamed my head off necessarily to get the goal, to keep the foul back. But I mean, you see the shirt pull.
Yeah.
You see, it is have the pull of the shirt. We've talked about this with Havertz, how he plays with the dark arts. Yeah. And, that means there are going to be some of those instances like Ben White holding a keeper's hand. Sometimes you just, sometimes they catch you. And I think that's probably, it was frustrating at the time. I think that's probably the right call overall. But I do think it's fair to say Porto can count themselves a little fortunate on that one.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I don't know. As you saw that, did you, how was your reaction to the
I mean, I was happy that Odegaard had the presence of mind to play to the whistle. And that's the thing. It's like there was no whistle at the time that he shot. The whistle wasn't blown until after. If the ref saw a shirt pull in the moment, blow the whistle. Why do you let Odegaard take the shot at that point? Right. So, or at least once you see the shirt resulted in a collision that took down like, the last two players like in that part of the field. Like, if you feel like that's a foul worth calling, call it then. Why wait till after you see that a goal was scored, right?
Well, part of that, I think, is sort of the idea of managing the game. Like, if Odegaard gets the ball and then he punts it into the sixth row,
so no one cares.
Part of it's just how fast so much of that happens.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, because there is not, and as the referee, part of it is your eyes are, I'm not exactly sure what the referees are supposed to be focusing on in those instances, but I mean, you see that foul happen, but then the ball immediately goes to Odegaard, who's taking a shot on goal, and that's sort like I can sympathize in the standpoint. Like, there were a couple instances, there were one or two instances, I'm thinking really late in the game, where there was a super delayed, like it was a pretty obvious offside, and the AR took his time making that call, which was kind of annoying. But in that one, I can sympathize with the ref, just the speed at which so much of those things are happening. And you just think about your processing what you're seeing in your head. And then not that he's walking himself through, what did I see? What did I do this? Do I blow the whistle? What am I doing? So much of that is reactionary still, but I think just the way the situation played out. Yeah, I don't know that. Let's put it this way. Yeah, I think if Odegaard boots it into the sixth row, you probably don't see anything called. Yeah, and the Porto coach is probably screaming his head off on the sidelines, and he might have a case, obviously knowing that a foul was called. But I suspect at that point they just sort of go, whatever, it's their ball.
Yeah,
and that what's the effective difference between a goal kick and a free kick from the edge of the box, or
right?
Who cares,
right? Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
So I could see that, but I don't want to get into the referee's mind too much on that one.
Right. Well, so 5 minutes later, I had something that I hadn't seen before. And this had been something that was on my list very early on, like the first, couple months that I was watching Arsenal play, that I was going to ask you. And then it became pretty clear that it seemed like I had answered my own questions and I didn't end up asking. But basically, the question was to the effect of, is there such a thing as a high kick that will get a call the same way like high sticking in hockey would get a call, right? And it seemed like, no, not necessarily. It's really at the ref's discretion. It's just, is it something where you're putting a player in danger recklessly with your foot? Is that basically what happened? So this was Jorginho got called, and they said, I forget if it was on screen or the commentators verbalized it, but they said it was for a high kick. He didn't make contact with somebody from what I saw, but it was just a recklessly high kick or something?
Yeah, basically, the word used is dangerous. It's a dangerous play. When the leg goes up high like that. I'm trying to recall, because now I have in my head, I watched a bunch of games over the last week in different leagues, and I'm having in my head, I recall, again, a player with his leg up high. Maybe it was the Jorginho play. Maybe I'm thinking of the same one. Mm-hmm. And people wanting a call, and there wasn't a call, or I don't know. But, I mean, yeah, when your leg comes high like that, especially if there I presumably was some contact. If there is contact and your leg's up high, I was going for the ball doesn't always fly as an excuse. You gotta be careful with your legs up high once you start getting, to somebody's upper body or their head, and that's understandable. That's kind of, I get that. So,
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I don't really have much else to say. I guess the only other really interesting action that I have noted is in the 85th minute. Saka took a shot. I think this was from a free kick that resulted from a corner kick. We had a lot of corner kicks and 2 to 3 notable free kicks. But so Saka took a shot. It was bounced clear by the keeper. Then Odegaard took a rebound shot and just didn't quite aim it well enough. But yeah. It was,
in some ways, I guess you could compare it to that play Porto had in the first leg where he cracks it off the post, comes right back to him, and then he misses wide. And the whole thing takes half a second.
Right.
So I guess we both get one.
Yeah, right.
In this tie.
But yeah, so other than that, we just had a bunch of corner kicks, a bunch of fouls not called on both teams. It wasn't like severely one-sided. Whatever you say about it, wasn't severely one-sided.
It was very inconsistent, I thought.
Yeah.
And I don't blame Porto for being upset by it. I at least in the general sense, they just did feel like there wasn't a lot of consistency between what was a foul, what wasn't. I thought overall the referee was better in terms of the. Porto got away, for what I've seen on the first leg, got away with a lot in terms of you fall over every time Arsenal's near the ball, so the referee stops play. There were definitely more than a few occasions, and he did it to us as well a couple times, where a player goes down and you just see him go,
"Yep,
get up!" Like you weren't fouled, get up, play on. Yeah. But he did have a few. You see some shirt pulls go uncalled. You see a few hard tackles. You're like, what? Where did you forget your cards, man? But I thought there was an inconsistency throughout the night, which it was a physical game, which is in some ways It's nice that we were able to win a physical game like that, but I think that still benefited a team like Porto and more like that.
Yeah. I mean, overall, to me, it felt like he was trying to just let them play more. It was like overall, the percentage of potential fouls called against both teams was lower than we've seen in other matches. And that was what stuck with me about it. It felt like overall, for the most part, for every one that he didn't call against us, there's probably at least one that he didn't call against them also. And it went both ways. It wasn't strictly one-sided where I was like up in arms about it.
Yeah. Again, it wasn't so much an biased in one's favor or the other, but more just sort of an inconsistency which in some ways is much more frustrating because then you don't really know like what you're allowed to do.
Right.
You don't get a sense that he's letting you play on, that's the frustrating part. But also,
that's true.
Some of that also stems from the tension of the game, right? It was close. It was tight, everything, especially when you get to extra time, like everything's on a knife edge and everything, it just seems so important. So some of that is just the tension of where we were and what's going on.
Yeah. So then we went into extra time. And so again, more corner kicks. Overall, sloppier is what I noted. Not as many opportunities. They were clearly getting tired. It was in the 106th minute that they brought on Eddie Nketiah, and Zinchenko was back, which was good. And Trossard and Kivior came off. So then, Zinchenko conceded a corner. I'm trying to remember what that play was. I think he didn't chase it down enough or something. Like, I forget what it was, but like, let it go. That was a little tricky. Like, they almost scored off that corner. Raya caught it. But then Havertz got a yellow card for pushing Pepe over.
that was
a tactical yellow.
Oh, yes. That was as soon as he did. It's like, yep. I mean, full extent. He knows exactly what he's doing. I'm taking the yellow to stop the play. Totally. I mean, it's frustrating when it happens to you, but in the circumstances, totally understand I had zero complaints about the yellow. I know exactly what Havertz is. I have no complaints there. And it got us to, especially by that point, there's a point where it starts to feel like teams are playing for penalties. I don't know that we were, but you do start to reach the point where it's like, nobody really seems like they can string enough passes together to break through. And there we were. 2 hours gone, 3.5 hours gone, and there's no winner. So it's the only way to do it.
Yeah, so we went to the penalty shootout, which the commentators were saying was the first one past the group stage, I guess, since the 2016 Champions League final that I guess was Real Madrid versus Atletico.
I remember hearing that too, and I haven't looked to check. I'm not saying they're wrong. I haven't not that I need to independently confirm, but I heard that too. That's wild.
Yeah,
that just seems so unbelievable.
Yeah,
but I guess I have no reason to think they're wrong.
Well, it's funny. In my mind, the first thing I go to is, but wait, no, last year with us, I was like, oh no, wait, no, that was the Europa League, not Champions League.
Yeah, this is Champions League.
Yep.
Now this is the one that counts.
Yeah. So So the penalties. So we both score the first time, Odegaard and Pepe. Then Havertz scores, and I think it was Wendell, they pronounced it. But
who was the guy locking down Saka most of the game? Again, pretty solid defensive game.
Yeah, but apparently not as awesome at taking penalties as Raya is at blocking them, because he got it into the corner, but Raya saved it. Now, I think that was that the one where he got his hand on it and it still managed to bounce over and behind him and off of his heel and then off of his butt, but not go over the goal line.
Yeah, I don't
ricocheted a lot after he blocked it.
Right. I don't remember the exact sequence of body part contact, but yeah, that was. And so here's the fun rule about penalties: until the ball stops, it's not live. They can't chase it up. But basically, if that ball had bounced off him into the net, that's a goal.
Right. Oh yeah, just like the regular game. That's what I assumed. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. In a regular game, had that been a penalty in a regular game, once the keeper touches it, it is a live ball. Anyone can go after it.
Okay.
Now, in a shootout, they don't want that sort of thing to happen. Keeper makes this. So in that case, the keeper makes the save. Because most cases when they make the save, right, it completely rebounds the other way, or you push it out or up wide or over the bar.
Right.
But here, because it's with the backspin and all of that, if it had rolled in, it would have been a goal, even though nobody else could have touched it at that stage. Right.
So that's interesting. I didn't realize that about regular match penalties. So typically, I guess you'd be talking about the person who shot the penalty, because most of the other players are far enough back, they're not going to be able to try and get it right back over. They'll be able to catch a rebound outside the 18-yard box or something.
I mean, and it depends where the rebound goes to. I mean, I have seen players score off the rebound on a penalty. Sometimes it's a guy coming in off the line, because once the shot is taken, some of them will
they rush
forward.
In. Okay,
and so the idea is that they're there when the rebound comes in. And sometimes it is a little nervy, even when you make a save or you hit the post or something on the penalty, and the ball has to be cleared away. Sometimes it can get a little nervy in the aftermath of the shot, even if it's not initially a goal. But it didn't go in. The important thing is this one didn't go in.
Yeah. All right. So that was the first one that he blocked, and then Saka scores his. Grujic scores. Raya got a finger on it, though. He guessed right. He was close, but just, I guess, didn't jump hard enough. Didn't quite get enough on it. And it went to a fourth round where Rice scored his. Galeno's was blocked, and we had it.
We did it. Galeno, by the way, was the man who scored the 90 whateverth winner in the first leg. So
I remember that. Yeah.
And David Raya goes to his left every single time. He dives the same way each time. Again, this is a lot of the preparation they're doing as far as tendencies and things like that. And Raya went to his left each and every time.
And they kept on kicking it there.
Well, there was at least I think their goals. I want to say at least one of their goals went to he dove left and the ball went right. I think that's partly how they scored. I mean, full credit to to our takers who were cool. Odegaard, the captain strikes. Havertz, just nonchalant. Saka's great. Declan Rice. We were having a chat. We're trying to think who the fifth taker might have been. You had some options on the field. Jesus, probably. But I mean, you also had. Nketiah was out there, even Zinchenko.
Well, right. I mean, so the commentators were speculating that Nketiah might have been brought in the 106th minute as a potential penalty taker, to take out maybe Kivior, or I guess Zinchenko for Kivior and Nketiah for Trossard. Who knows?
Yeah, right. And it does. I mean, I think the switch with Trossard was still Nketiah still a forward, Trossard's a forward, so there's a bit of a like for like there. But yeah, it is interesting as you get to that stage of the game. You start to think about who do I want on the field if there are penalties. Right.
Because it's likely at that point. So, yeah.
But, yes. Arsenal, deep exhale.
Yeah.
Did it.
We did it. We're on the quarterfinals. Yeah.
First time in the quarterfinals in the Champions League since, 2011, they said?
Yeah.
Just...
Yeah, so it's an exciting way to end the match. So with that done, so our record in Europe against Porto reflects 1 win and 1 loss. Is that how
Correct.
it goes in the books? Okay.
Correct. Yeah, 1 win and 1 loss.
Yeah. Okay. Also, I noticed there was a tattoo with a date, August 13th of 2021 on the back of Raya's neck, because they showed a close-up at one point, probably when he was celebrating after or something. Do you know what that date is for him?
That is the date of his debut in the Premier League.
Ah, okay.
So here's a fun side story to that. The club, of course, we are currently he is on loan from and will buy him from is Brentford.
Right.
Guess who Brentford played on August 13th, 2021?
It won't be a guess because I had actually looked this up too, but Arsenal, right? That's pretty funny.
It's a game it's in fact a game you've seen. It was the game that opened the season of the Amazon documentary. So,
right, okay. That's funny.
That was quite a night in a lot of ways. But yeah, that was his Premier League debut, which congrats to him on that. Now we can smile about it because of where we've gone since.
Yeah. I'm not the kind of person who's ever going to get a tattoo, but if you do get a tattoo, I strongly encourage it to be something that will never change. Like, mom, fine, you'll always love your mom. Your kids' names, like they will always be your kids, right? A lot of other stuff, your opinions may change, but I think his debut in the Premier League, that counts as something that is always going to be significant to him no matter what else happens.
I suspect.
I support it.
I suspect when David Raya is counting up all of the things that he's done in his life, playing in the Premier League is gonna rank pretty. Is gonna be
when he's sitting in bed like Nicky Salapu in Next Goal Wins, reading the story of his life and career to his grandchildren. Another keeper, a little lower in stature. So who is your player of the week? Player of the match?
The match. So, I mean, obviously, I think Odegaard deserves a lot of credit for his overall performance, the orchestration, of course, that pass. But I'm actually going to say David Raya. Not just because of the shootout, though he was excellent in the shootout. I mean, 2 saves and a penalty shootout is excellent. But also, I thought he was just a commanding presence in the box. Like, Porto did not generate a lot of real clear-cut chances. I think he ended up making 1 or 2 saves, but overall, I think he did very well to snuff out chances on a handful of free kicks and corners that they never turn into anything. And this isn't quite. We mentioned the article. I gave you the article last week, where we mentioned it previously. It's the things he does, or was he stops the things from happening, things things that he does,
what goes
that
unseen.
don't happen.
Yes,
what goes unseen. It's not quite that because I saw it, but I think he made some of those plays that prevented opportunities from happening and commanded the box overall really well. So I'm going to say David Raya, and the penalty shootout just obviously that's the cherry on top. It's a lot more important than that. But I think adding those things together for me, especially in a game where conceding a goal would have been deadly the way that he was playing.
Yeah, definitely. I'm right there with you. For me, it's largely about the saves. I mean, how often does the keeper get to win the match for a team? Like in a more or less indisputable way. Not like, oh, he had a strong contribution. Like it is like, no, like he saved the 2 goals that if they had scored it, we don't know what would have happened. We might have they might have choked and gone wide at some point, but no, like he did it. And that is why today I am once again wearing my number 22. So yeah, it's fun. I mean, it was something that my son was surprised by. Like the keeper won the game. Like he didn't understand, and it was funny explaining to him like, see, that's something you can do. Yeah,
show him the highlights. Let him see the saves. Huh?
Yeah. Well, and see if he can get another trading card. So, before we move on to our other topics of the week, I want to tell you guys about what we use to record this show every week. So it's a tool called Zencastr, and it makes it super easy to record a podcast. You just log into your browser and you start recording a high quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of zen knowing Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. For any nerds in the audience, it records locally. So whether your internet connection is rock solid or not, ours is very often not, everything is recorded locally. So even if somebody drops off the call altogether, you can always recover your recordings one way or another. They're never lost. It's also an all-in-one solution. So if you've thought about podcasting before and you gave up thinking you needed a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast all in one place and distribute to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations. So if this sounds good to you, go to zencastr.com/pricing and use code Gooner, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all our podcasting content needs. It's time for you to share your story. Visit the link in the description for more. All right. So now that excitement is over, what other exciting stuff is happening in the wide world of football and Arsenal?
Well, it was quite a week. We were talking about this before. All of a sudden, I didn't see all of these stories today, but I saw some of them, and I just started to pull them together. And is our shared document where we have the news links. All of a sudden, you opened up and you were like, "Wow, that's a lot." It is a lot. We'll start with, I guess, the most fun news. Ben White is going to be here just a little bit longer. Extended his contract,
how much?
I believe through 2029.
Wow. All right.
So that'll be good, good to see, which, fascinating enough, and we'll talk more about this a little bit. So Arsenal does not have a game this weekend because it is an international break.
Yep.
And White actually refused a call up from England, or at least told England he did not want to be called up. You may recall that he left the England camp during the World Cup under...
mysterious circumstances, right?
Mysterious is a little, but there's definitely a lot unsaid, and Gareth
not
Southgate,
publicly disclosed circumstances, mysterious to us.
And Gareth Southgate, the England manager, made some comments about, he called him, and White basically announced that White said he didn't want to be called up, which is why he didn't. And I guess if you're the England manager, you have to, someone's going to ask the question. Ben White is obviously in excellent form. You could see why England would want him to play, and I think Southgate presumably has, the honest answer to the question is he didn't want to. Now, why he doesn't want to? I'm unsatisfied with a lot of the explanations I'm seeing, so I'm not going to comment necessarily on. Okay, I don't look at any of them and say to myself, "Yeah, that seems right." I mean, there's bits in. I'm seeing a lot of theories and speculation, but nobody actually involved is really saying anything. So I don't. I do think it was interesting and probably not entirely accidental that the day of the announcement of the contract was the same day of the press conference where they said England said he did not want to be called up. So, or maybe the day after, they were right around one another.
Well, so when you're talking about the coincidence there, I mean, is the thought potentially that he either from management at Arsenal or just from himself doesn't want to risk injury during this crucial part of a season for us? Is that the thought?
No, I think chances are whatever it is was tied to something that happened in Qatar, which is why he left. What's interesting about it is, when he did, Arsenal, it was like a tweet. Arsenal said something like, "We're with you, Ben," or something. Which makes you think it's like a personal issue, like a family emergency, something along those lines. Again, I don't know anything. I'm not suggesting, but maybe there's something going on behind the scenes, and so there is a sense that the club and the FA are a bit at odds about what happened and what it means and all of that. Who knows? Maybe when Southgate and perhaps other members of the England staff move on to other jobs, perhaps he does come back into the team. Who knows? Again, I don't want to speculate too deeply, but again, there were, because of some of the stuff that happened back in Qatar in the winter, that does lead me to think there's potentially more to the timing than just he just happened to. I think it's just a massive coincidence.
Okay.
So that, but it makes you wonder, but also to a larger extent, who cares? Benny White's going to be an Arsenal man for another few more years. So that's which is good to see. It's good to lock up key players like that.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. So, what else is on the hit parade?
We're just going to walk through it. So the big story, really, as great as Ben White's contract is of course, by beating Porto, we did not win the Champions League. We advanced to the quarterfinals. The quarterfinal draw was held on Friday, this past Friday.
Right.
And Arsenal was drawn against Bayern Munich.
Okay.
Arsenal fans of a certain vintage, mine, will remember a stretch sort of at the Arsenal was in the Champions League for about 20 years in a row. I mean, really just kind of an astounding streak for an English club. And the last few years, we got knocked out just about every year at the hands of Barcelona and Bayern Munich. Now, some of this was because these were two of the best teams in Europe at the very peak of their abilities. Some of it was also because we were, for a lot of reasons in Arsenal history we don't have to get into right now, we were definitely significantly atrophied from where we had been a decade earlier. And so we got, especially the final one, our last appearance in the Champions League before this year, we drew Bayern in the round of 16 and we got thumped. We were not on their level at all. And Bayern has given us some pretty resounding defeats out of it. We have been handled out of the Champions League in about a decade or so ago at hands of Bayern. So I'm not upset to draw them. Now, look, Bayern is very good. If there is a list of European royalty, so to speak, in terms of clubs, Bayern Munich is on that list.
Mm-hmm.
They are a premier team in Germany. They won the German league literally like 10, 11 years in a row. Maybe not this year though, because they signed Harry Kane. Oh my God! Bayern wins everything every year. They sign Harry Kane, and they won't win anything. They're currently like 10 points back of Bayer Leverkusen in the Bundesliga. They've been knocked out of the German Cup. The Champions League is pretty much all they have left. They're still ridiculously talented. They're still very good. It will be very difficult to play them. The big advantage of playing Bayern compared to what we saw with Porto is a team that's going to play in the low block or the mid block, is going to be very defensive, is going to try to muck up the game in a lot of ways that we kind of talked about. Most of the teams we were likely to draw, the two teams I didn't want to draw for the quarterfinals, one was City. And not because I'm afraid of City. We've established this. I'm not exactly afraid of City, but to play them twice in quick succession after the league game, that would be a lot. So I kind of didn't want to do that. And people, I know, and this is more of a English or European perspective. There's something about playing another English team in the Champions League. It's like, what's the point? You want to play the giants from Spain and Italy. Okay, fine. I didn't really want to see City. The other team I really didn't want to see was Atletico Madrid, who is a slightly more talented version of Porto. They play that kind of style. I didn't really want to see. I guess if there was a team that would have been the best draws, probably would have been Dortmund, the German team who's not as strong as they typically are, and a team that likes to play open, so it would have, I think, been to our benefit. Again, I'm not afraid of any of these teams. I'm not afraid of Bayern. They might beat us. They're very good. Make no mistake, they are a very good team, but so are we. So this is going to be very interesting. We'll play the first leg. We'll be at home. And it will be it's not until April. I had it. Hold on. I just had it pulled up. We will play Bayern in April. Where is it? On April 9th at home, and then the return leg will be the 17th in Munich. So get ready. However, we should add that game at the Emirates will be played without Bayern fans.
Oh?
So Bayern fans got themselves in a wee bit of trouble. Where was the story here? They have actually, they've been banned from away support because they've been sanctioned by UEFA for their fans' use of pyrotechnics.
Oh, in the stands?
Yes, apparently. Ooh. So again, this is the link we have here. It's from The Athletic. The supporters used pyrotechnics in Rome against Lazio fans in the last 16 tie last month. Bayern have received a ban because they were initially handed a suspended sentence by UEFA for the use of pyrotechnics during a match at FC Copenhagen in the group stage. So in other words, this is their second offense.
Right.
And so for that, they get a ban. So that's about, I think it's about 3,500 tickets in that corner section, on the lower level corner section, which are now probably going to be Arsenal fans. Now, will there be Bayern Munich fans in the stands? Of course. Visiting fans will always find their way in. And not sneaking in. They'll buy the tickets legitimately. But, they'll be scattered throughout the stands, and there won't be as many of them. And they won't have the away section like that. So it will definitely be even more than usual a very pro Arsenal crowd. And then of course we'll head to Germany. There will be Arsenal fans there, but the Allianz Arena in Munich is a very large, very impressive stadium, very modern, very new, and it will be of course full of Bavarians. So,
this is another two-legged match.
Yep, just like with Porto, and we mentioned this last time. So I was unclear on this, and I think I said the wrong thing. There are no away goals, period, in the Champions League.
Right. Yeah, you did clarify that last week.
Yep. I knew it was in extra time. I knew it was definitely gone. I wasn't quite sure about the whole thing, but yes, definitely no.
Yeah.
The more goals we can score at home in the first leg, the better.
Yes, definitely. So then so let's say we make it on to the semifinals. Is that also two legs, or is that only the quarter and round of 16?
Yes, the semifinals will be two legs, and the final is a single game. Now, we should point out in the draw, the draw was done, and they actually bracketed the tournament from the quarterfinals on forward. So we do know if Arsenal wins, or if Bayern wins, frankly, who they will face in the semifinal. And it's the winner of a tie between Real Madrid and Manchester City.
So we might actually, in short order, hopefully we face Madrid, I guess. But yeah.
Well, I mean, if there's a team you don't want to face in the if there's a team that is built to win the Champions League, it's Real Madrid. They've won the competition like 15 times. They are by far the most successful club in the competition.
Okay.
They are the team now that we have played Real in the Champions League. When I started watching Arsenal, the first thing I saw was we drew them at Highbury in the second leg. We had beaten them in the Bernabeu. We had won in Madrid, which an English team had never done before.
Yeah.
That was in 2006 as part of so we advanced against Real on our way to our one trip to the final that year where we lost to Barcelona. But I mean, it's very interesting if you look at the draw. I think if you would ask people to name the four favorites for the tournament, you'd probably name the four teams on our side of the bracket.
Right.
The only one you might not hear is PSG, Paris Saint-Germain, who is on the other side. They'll draw Barcelona. Now, I think they'll beat Barcelona because they're better than Barcelona. Frankly, Barcelona is kind of a mess. But they could easily choke that away. And then the last one is Dortmund and Atletico Madrid, who are generally regarded as the two weakest clubs in the draw overall. So yeah, it's definitely a weight. It feels weighted to that side. So it'll be that Madrid City tie is going to be fascinating. They've met the last 2 years in the Champions League, and they each have a win in terms of advancing overall. So that's going to be it's not often Arsenal Bayern Munich as in terms of a glamour tie is going to be overshadowed. That's going to be overshadowed. City and Real is definitely a bigger game. Yeah. So it'll be interesting. The winner of that one, I think, is the favorite to win the whole thing. But we talked about Bayern's weakness. I think they could win it. Certainly, I think we're in that category too. So
yeah. All right.
So yeah, this is what you go into the Champions League for, is to play Bayern Munich home and away. That's what this is for. So
Right.
looking forward to it.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, so yeah, it's which, by the way, other European action. Aston Villa advances to the next leg, the next round of the Europa League, which means our game against them has to be rearranged, which is actually the weekend between the Munich game, the Bayern games. So that game will now played on Sunday, the 14th, as opposed to Saturday, the 13th. This does mean, though, that we only get 2 days off, Monday and Tuesday before the second leg at Bayern.
Right.
As opposed to the 3 we originally had when we had Sunday off, which isn't a surprise, but it's just one of those, okay, maybe adds a little bit more to that. Again, you think about how you manage the club across those games, rotating players.
Right.
It adds a little bit more to...
maybe you don't play them in that Premier League match.
Well, no. Here's the interesting thing about it. I think it puts a lot more impetus on the opening leg to really give yourself a good advantage, and it could, because it means you now have an extra day before Villa, which is not going to be an easy game. We should also add that Villa is going to be a game we need to keep an eye on in the league.
Yeah.
Ignoring just the fact that we're running in with City and Liverpool and have to win every game anyway. But I mean, Liverpool, Villa is going to be one of the ones we definitely need. Is going to be a trickier one. That might be a game where you have to ask yourself, should we go all out here? If the lead is big enough, not that we're going to. Saka's going to play as many minutes as he can across all 3 games. Saliba's going to play as many minutes as he can across all 3 games, right? But you wonder, do you maybe push harder in the Villa game, thinking, if you've got a big lead, maybe you rotate away? I don't know. It does create some interesting potential lineup decisions. Now, the other thing is, maybe you're more aggressive you can put a more aggressive offensive focus lineup against Villa, who's probably going to play more defensively, and you'll need to break them down, as opposed to going to Bayern, where they are probably going to be much more open, especially at home. So maybe you shuffle the lineup that way. Something to think about as we get towards that game in the middle of April, or those games, and as we get to April. How this is the trick, right? As you go deeper in these competitions and you're competing on multiple fronts, how do you manage your lineup week to week, game to game? And we're going to keep doing this. We rescheduled the Chelsea game we talked about last week, but we will not have to, thankfully, reschedule Wolves. Wolves somehow this weekend choked away a lead against Coventry City, who's in the championship.
Who are they?
Coventry City in the championship. Who's now going to play Manchester United in the semifinals of the FA Cup. So good for them.
Oh boy. Yeah.
But they are, we're the team or the club that calls itself Manchester United. But so that means we were worried that weekend of the semifinals, we're playing Wolves. That's a game that could have been rescheduled. Now it doesn't have to be. So that actually helps us a little bit. So I'm actually glad to a certain extent that Wolves, I'm not trying to make fun of Wolves or anything here too much. I mean,
it's not Schadenfreude. Yeah. We're not happy that they failed.
I take no pleasure in Wolves' failures, but it is a benefit to us to play that game as originally scheduled, as opposed to having to jam our weekends, our final weekend into the seasons, or weeks of the season even further. So,
yeah. All right, and
yeah, we're just rolling the stories here. Smaller note: Nottingham Forest. This was today, has been given a 4-point deduction.
Ooh. Following
a breach of the league's profitability and sustainability rules. This was a story that This was a story that first popped up in January, that they and Everton were under investigation. They have been deducted points, which actually at this point puts them in 18th. So they're now in the relegation spot. Now, granted, they are a point behind Luton, who I think they're better than Luton. They're not better than many teams, frankly. Forest. So they are currently in a relegation spot. Charges are still pending. They have not had a decision yet against Everton, which would be a 2nd points deduction. They've already lost 6 points.
Right.
And they may lose some more. Everton's at 25 points. They're 4 points ahead of Forest in terms of safety. Another deduction for them could be, I think in the end they'll pull it out, just because I think they're a lot better than the teams in the relegation zone. But that's going to get a little weird.
So it's another financial fair play deduction they're facing?
It's not multiple counts. Fair play.
Okay.
This is profitability and sustainability rules.
And
which
that's
are
different because it sounds really
different.
similar.
Yes, they're different. They're financially related. I'm not sure I could really fully explain the difference to them.
Okay.
But a lot of them have to do with, like we've talked about the story of Leeds and how they almost went completely under because of bad contracts and stuff in the Champions League. It's this, and especially coming out of the pandemic where a lot of teams were financially in trouble. So part of these rules are supposed to, help maintain clubs' finances. Now, what people will tell you, and it's not entirely wrong, is it tends to freeze a lot of spending in place. Who comes out of this looking good? Well, the clubs who have a lot of money to spend, City, Liverpool, Arsenal, United, Chelsea, the big clubs, and a club like Everton is hamstrung. They can't buy players because they don't, because of the way the accounting works and whatnot. So one other little bit here they threw in this is from the Athletics article. The Premier League has penciled in May 24 as a backstop date for any appeal, which comes after the end of the season on May 19th. So in other words, you could still see after the end of the season appeals potentially still being worked out, probably involving Everton and Forest, which isn't going to necessarily affect us, but could have an interesting impact on the relegation fight. Now, granted, who knows? Maybe if Forest survives the drop, because they have 7 days to notify whether they intend to appeal. If they survive, even if they are in the middle of an appeal, and if they survive, they may just drop in altogether and say, "Well, we survived." But if they potentially are relegated, I mean, that could go for a few days after the end of the season, which is super awkward.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So.
Huh.
Whew, whew.
Huh? So, as we transition towards international topics.
Yeah. So we mentioned Ben White is not going to England. We also know that Gabriel Martinelli is not going to Brazil. He is still recovering from his foot. He did not. Okay. He was not on the bench for the Porto game. He had not fully healed. So there are 13 Arsenal players who are going on the break to join their national sides. So we've got Kiwior is going to play for Poland. He's going to play Estonia, including their keeper Karl Hein, who's Arsenal's number 3. Zinchenko will be with Ukraine, Jorginho with Italy, Odegaard with Norway, Raya with Spain, Trossard for Belgium, Gabriel Magalhaes is going for Brazil. For England, Ramsdale, Rice, and Saka all going. Saliba for France, Kai Havertz for Germany, and I think that's everybody. Unfortunately, the only list I have is from Arsenal's website, where they list them by games rather than necessarily like a full list, like just a straight list of players. But I think that's everybody. So a busy group. This isn't like we can go to Dubai again. This is a good chunk of the roster is going to be busy. I think there are a couple of playoffs. Poland and Estonia is in a playoff for the Euros. Ukraine is playing Bosnia in a playoff for the Euros, so there's some potential for those games. But a lot of these, especially the European ones, are friendlies. So
yeah, I mean, they're not
gonna,
it sounds like just about our entire first team is playing for their nations. So
it's a lot, yeah. But again, that's kind of what happens when you're as good as we are.
Well, yeah, it's a natural consequence, sure.
So
and having a run of good form on top of it, like you talked about with Ben White too, like they're in high demand right now as we're sitting still. Well, actually, never mind, because we didn't have a match. We may technically not be at the top of the table right now, but we have a match in hand, probably. Right?
No, we are, because Liverpool and City were both playing in the FA Cup this weekend.
Oh,
so
okay.
We're all still even.
It's not with the rest of the table.
Yeah, they are. Or maybe they're a game ahead, but we are still on top by goal difference against
Liverpool,
against Liverpool.
Right.
Yeah, we're all even. 28 games played.
Right.
Arsenal and Liverpool at 64 points. City at 63. So
cool. All right, so it sounds like also internationally we're going to be starting World Cup qualification for CONCACAF, our own home confederation, right?
Yes. So that begins this week. Now, obviously, we're going to go through and pick a CONCACAF team to follow. Typically, of course, we just give up and just follow the U.S., right? But as the hosts of the World Cup, the U.S., as well as Mexico and Canada, are automatically into the World Cup, and so they do not have to go through qualification, which, having gone through many a CONCACAF qualification, thank God. It is awful. There, some of the CONCACAF is a fascinating region to be a part of. That's the polite way to say that. But that begins now. We should point out CONCACAF has 3 rounds. The first round is going to be a 4-team knockout tournament involving the 4 lowest rated teams in CONCACAF, including a matchup between the Virgin Islands. That's right, the U.S. and the British Virgin Islands will square off. Then they will go into a group stage, which is going to be count the groups here. 6 groups of 5 teams. The top 2 teams in each group will advance to a third round, which is 3 groups of 4 teams. The winners of those groups will join the U.S., Mexico, and Canada in the World Cup, and then the top 2 second place finishers will then advance to the Interconfederation playoffs. And if you're confused by all of that, don't worry. It'll all make sense as we walk through the process.
Well, yeah, we'll go step by step as it happens.
Yes.
So we are going to pick, as we have for each confederation, a team for you and I to each follow through. So I was looking, and not a whole lot of these countries are ones that I'm really too familiar with, and especially once you get beyond pot 2, they're mostly pretty obscure. So I chose the one team whose sports culture I have the slightest bit of familiarity with. My familiarity came from the 1990s movie Cool Runnings. I'm going to pick Jamaica. We'll see how that goes. They are ranked 3rd in CONCACAF as of last time around, I guess. So
they're ranked 6th because they're behind the U.S., Canada, and Mexico.
Okay, useful context. Yes,
they're 3rd out of the teams in qualification. So I will say, Pat, Jamaica is actually the team I wanted to pick.
Okay,
it's okay. I let you do it. I had a backup. So Jamaica is a really interesting one. One of the things they are actually able to do, because there are a number of English players of Jamaican descent. Jamaica is actually able to call up a fair number of quality English players. Now, they've had some difficulty integrating them into the team, and so they maybe haven't played up to their capabilities. But there are certainly, and they're a roster with some names, some well-known names. The keeper, Andre Blake, plays for Philadelphia and MLS. Tavon Gray plays for New York City, so a couple MLS names. A couple of Premier League names. Bobby De Cordova-Reed plays for Fulham. A couple of Coventry players, since we mentioned their name earlier. You have Michael Antonio, who plays at West Ham. Damari Gray, who's now in Saudi Arabia, but did play. He was in the Premier League recently as well.
Okay.
Is Leon Bailey still kicking around? That was a guy that was around forever. CONCACAF All-Star, Leon Bailey. But anyway, I don't see his name anywhere on here. Okay, they have a guy from Kamar Roof, who plays for Rangers. Gray was I'm just looking this up now. He was at Everton the last couple of seasons. So, so certainly there is some talent on that team, and I'm very curious to see how they mesh and are able to pull that together.
Yeah, that's definitely more than I was aware of. So thanks for that.
And that's what was drawing me to Jamaica. The team, they're definitely one of the better dressed international squads. Black, yellow, and green makes for some interesting and fun combinations. I am going to take Costa Rica.
Okay.
Costa Rica is typically historically considered the 3rd best team in CONCACAF. They actually have twice made the round of 16 of the World Cup. Actually, I believe back in 2018, they were in the quarterfinals actually in 2018. They were it was 2014. They went to the quarterfinals. They actually won their group, a group consisting of Uruguay, Italy, and England, which is pretty impressive. So at their peak, the Ticos are a very dangerous side, but they are a bit of an older group now. So I'll be curious to see if they're able to pull it together. They're still very good, but they also are going to have to Jamaica. So this weekend, by the way, is not CONCACAF qualifying for these teams.
Right.
Jamaica will be playing in the finals of the CONCACAF Nations League. In fact, they play the United States on Thursday. The other one is going to be Mexico and Panama, and sort of if you're looking for a third choice out of CONCACAF, Panama would be an interesting one. They hammered Costa Rica, which in their quarterfinal for the Nations League. So I'm interested to see if Costa Rica can sort of where they're going in terms of rebuilding, where they are in their cycle. I think they're good enough. Those three are probably the top three in CONCACAF and the most likely to qualify. Keep an eye out for El Salvador and Honduras as well. Honduras in particular is a team and so in particular is capable of it has some quality players over the years. So CONCACAF is going to be very interesting without the big two, the U.S. and Mexico, and then also Canada, who historically isn't very strong, but has currently has a very some really good players on their team.
Yeah. So all right. So looks like something's going on in Paris.
Yes, also this summer. So we've talked about Copa America is coming this summer, the European Championship this summer. Also, the Olympic soccer tournament is this summer, men's and women's. It's a very big deal for the women. It's sort of a U23 tournament for the men. But if you're interested in this, and I both love international soccer and the Olympics, so cool. They will Wednesday of this week, the 20th of March, is the draw for the Olympic for the groups for the Olympic tournament. Now, having said that, there are still a handful of teams that still have to qualify currently, and I'm just finding a list here. Currently, who's qualified? France as the hosts, the U.S., the Dominican Republic, Spain, Israel, Ukraine, Morocco, Egypt, Mali, Paraguay, and Argentina, with a handful of spots still to be given out. So the draw for the men's and the women's tournament will be, that's the men's tournament. I listed off the teams there. The men's and women's tournament will both be drawn. So that'll be interesting to see what that looks like if you're someone who is curious to watch Olympic soccer, which I enjoy, I have to say.
All right. So, what is coming up for next week?
Well, I've kind of told you it's the international break. I will add, for our sake, though, hey, first off, we support the U.S. here on this podcast. This is America. This is an American supporting podcast. The U.S. will play the CONCACAF Nations League semifinal against Jamaica on Thursday, and then on Sunday they will either play the third place game or the final in the championship against either the loser or winner, depending how it plays out, between Mexico and Panama in the other semifinal. Those games are all going to be held, by the way, at Jerry World at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. So that'll be an interesting one. I debated going up there, but I'm otherwise busy this weekend, so I can't do that. But that'll be interesting. And then also we have to report. We mentioned World Cup qualifying. Asian qualifying continues this break. India will play Afghanistan twice in this break. They will not play in Afghanistan. That's not a good idea. That game will be in Abha, Saudi Arabia, and then they will play the game in India will be in Guwahati. I think that's how you pronounce that, at the Indira Gandhi Athletic Stadium. So, India. Japan will be playing essentially a home and home against North Korea. So they will play in Tokyo on the 21st, and then on the 26th they will play at Kim Il-sung Stadium in Pyongyang. Which, if I'm not mistaken, is it the one I'm thinking of? That's the largest stadium. No, this is only 50,000 people. It's not the big one.
Okay. Apparently,
Pyongyang has the largest stadium in the world, which seats something like well over 100,000. Like, it's a massive bowl.
Well, that makes sense if you're in a country whose government can force you at gunpoint to attend a soccer match, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's only the second largest. They don't really do it. Well, they do it for some international games, but also rarely for the national team. It's the Rungrado 1st of May Stadium. It seats 114,000 people.
Wow.
And it is the second largest stadium in the world. By seating capacity, after the Narendra Modi Stadium in Gujarat, India, which is not for soccer, it's for cricket.
Of course.
Which seats 132,000 people. Good God.
Oh my God. Can you imagine the parking there? How many mopeds can fit in that parking lot?
Wow. Anyway. So we have some Asian qualifiers and then a bunch of friendlies if you're into that sort of thing. Nations League. It's international break. No Arsenal. Relax. because for Arsenal, we do not play until Easter Sunday, the 31st of March, at Manchester City.
Right.
We're coming back with we're coming back with a bang.
I'm a little nervous about that. Like, we've talked about our last couple international breaks being a little bit dicey the first match back. So hopefully we can shake that and get our act together to face City.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that next week, though.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining us at Gooner U. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also listen to our show on Apple, Spotify, and some other places. If you're only listening, try watching us on YouTube. There's a link in the show notes to take you there. Wherever you watch or listen, join other smart and considerate listeners like yourself and like, subscribe, rate, or review, and share the show. Thanks again to our sponsor, Zencastr. You can find us on Twitter to get updates and ask questions. Check out our description for links to everything we talk about, our sponsor, and our Twitter pages. Again, my name is Dove, and you can find me on Twitter at Dove Frankel. With me, as always, is Keith, and you can find him in a pub watching Arsenal matches.
Come on, you Gunners.